Chong King Ergang took advantage of his birthday feast to gather his followers and plot an invasion against the Yu Kingdom. Little did he know, today's feast would be his burial ground. At that moment, Chong King downed his cup of wine in one gulp, stood up, grabbed the large sword beside him, and walked to the center of the banquet. He thrust the sword's tip into the ground, then pointed commandingly at the envoy from the Sand Barbarian tribe, saying, "Isn't your Sand Barbarian tribe always claiming to be the strongest warriors? Then try your strength against me today." After his words, a few of the Sand Barbarian tribe's masters exchanged uneasy glances. They all knew that Chong King was famously a natural powerhouse and a madman with exceptional martial skills, almost unbeatable in combat. Seeing no response from them, Chong King couldn't help but mockingly laugh. "What's the matter? Are all the warriors of your Sand Barbarian tribe just a bunch of cowards? A man can be killed, but not insulted." With these words, the Sand Barbarian tribe warriors could no longer hold back. They drew their swords and charged at Chong King. However, even when surrounded, Chong King's mood was unaffected. As they approached, he swung his large sword with one hand. In the blink of an eye, these Sand Barbarian tribe warriors were sent flying into the air, their swords shattered, and blood spewed from their mouths. The next second, they heavily crashed to the ground, their bodies completely shattered, internal organs and bones broken. They were thoroughly dead. In an instant, the banquet hall was in chaos, dead silent, with everyone hiding behind barriers. Su Jianting, having witnessed Chong King's prowess, was utterly shocked. Chong King truly seemed like an invincible war god, defeating 5 of the Sand Barbarian tribe's strongest warriors in a blink. At this moment, he fell into deep thought. Chong King's martial prowess was too domineering. If he were on the battlefield, he would be unrivaled. If one day Chong King was no longer under control, he wondered whether his own father could defeat him. Meanwhile, under the dual stimulation of alcohol and slaughter, Chong King suddenly became extremely excited, wildly swinging his large sword around the hall. Everyone was terrified by his astonishing swordsmanship, and the servants screamed and fled the banquet hall. Unintentionally, Chong King's sword struck directly at the jade sculpture gifted by Shen Lang, splitting it in two. At that moment, Chong King suddenly froze, a severe pain surging through his head. It felt as if something inside his skull had shattered, and he lost all consciousness. Then, he slowly kneeled to the ground amid the flattering cheers of his followers. A guard, noticing something was wrong with Chong King, stepped forward to check on him. "My king?" But when he saw Chong King bleeding from all orifices, he was stunned. Another guard hurried forward to help, but it was already too late. After a thorough examination, Chong King was already without any signs of life. This turn of events shocked everyone present, and Chong King Ergang was completely offline. Meanwhile, back at the Su family mansion, Su Nan, who hadn't yet received the news, was pondering his next moves. He had planned to wait a while longer to implement his plan, but the death of Wu had unexpectedly led to a direct confrontation with the sovereign. As a result, he had to move his plans forward. Although this would slightly disadvantage the Su family and reduce their bargaining chips, he still saw the Su family as the ultimate winners. Just then, his confidant, Su Yong, rushed in frantically. "Master, it's bad. Lin Bingjong is dead." It turned out that on the 3rd day after Shen Lang was acquitted, Lin Bingjong was arrested for embezzlement and taken to the Court of Judicial Review. After a day and night of interrogation, news of his suicide emerged. However, Su Nan was indifferent upon hearing this, merely stating he was just an insignificant pawn. If he's dead, so be it. At this moment, he was still waiting for the news Su Jianting would bring back. Once Chong King invaded the western territories of the Yu Kingdom, he could collaborate with the Three-Eyed Evil for an inside-outside attack, catching Ning Yuanxian off guard and unable to respond. Perhaps tens or even hundreds of thousands of innocent people might die, but in Su Nan's view, if it meant grasping control over the Yu King and elevating the Su family, what harm was there in using these bones as a stepping stone? However, just as he was exhilarated, Su Yong cautiously handed over a secret letter. "This is a secret letter sent by the prince through a hidden guard." Su Nan was startled. Su Jianting actually had a hidden guard deliver the letter? Such urgency. Could it be that something had changed with Chong King? The moment he opened the secret letter and saw its contents, he was struck as if by lightning and froze on the spot. The letter was written in code and contained just one line: "Chong King is dead." At this, Su Nan's eyes widened in horror. How is this possible? Such a coincidental death. Could it be Shen Lang's doing again? On the other side, the Wu Kingdom's army of 30,000 was marching southward, now nearing Weno City of the Yu Kingdom. The Yu Kingdom's army was rushing its preparations, with the Northern Guard, Ho Nangong Ao, stationed there to defend. The two nations' armies were about to confront each other at Weno City, and the situation was on the verge of erupting. At this critical juncture, the sovereign finally could not restrain himself and summoned Shen Lang, who was still being punished in the dungeon. Shen Lang stood energetically before the sovereign, respectfully saying, "May I ask why your majesty has summoned this humble servant?" Seeing Shen Lang looking radiant, the sovereign glared fiercely at Li Ji. "Didn't I say to starve this rascal for a few days? Look at him. He's about ready to burp in my face." However, the sovereign was not in the mood to sweat the small stuff and directly asked, "Shen Lang, King Wu personally leads an army of 30,000 soon to reach Weno City. What are your thoughts on this? I originally thought that King Wu, being young and impetuous, just wanted to boost morale at home after winning a border hunt. Hearing this, Shen Lang was taken aback. Such a large deployment? If that's the only reason, there would be no need for King Wu to personally lead the troops. At this point, the sovereign suddenly asked, Shen Lang, do you think this has anything to do with Su Nan directly? After a moment of silence, Shen Lang replied, Your Majesty, if all this is related to Su Nan, then his intentions are quite clear. However, we must always prepare for the worst. If I am not mistaken, the attack on Weno City by the Wu Kingdom is just the beginning. While our forces are distracted, the Chu Kingdom's army might approach the Yu Kingdom's western territories, tying down West Guard Marquis Zhong Yao's forces. Next, King Wu will continue to reinforce his troops, creating a situation of overwhelming military presence, completely engaging the mighty Duke and Northern Guard Marquis. At the critical moment, Chong King will then strike the west, catching our army off guard. Once that happens, Su Nan will be able to demand whatever he wants from your majesty. The sovereign's face changed dramatically upon hearing this. He had of course considered this scenario, but he had always been gambling that Su Nan would not dare to make this move. Shen Lang continued, Your Majesty, I think this is not even the worst case scenario. Su Nan is a calm and cunning old fox, and I believe his plans are not made on the spur of the moment, but have been long in the making. Initially, he might not have cared about my presence, but having broken his scheme several times, he wanted to eliminate me, and he almost succeeded with the Iwuwu case. This defeat was completely outside his plans, and now, I presume he is desperate and has moved his plans forward. It seems, then, that his arrangements are not just to deal with changes in the court situation, but are part of a larger, deeper conspiracy. The sovereign's face turned pale instantly. Are you saying that Su Nan is planning a new rebellion similar to the Glamorous Province incident? Shen Lang nodded. Su Nan has been colluding with Chu for a long time. He has been continuously subsidizing Chong, and Chu has been supporting the Su family. Over the years, that's a huge amount of gold. Have you ever thought about why? The sovereign fell silent. He of course knew the reason, which is also why he preferred to indulge the Zhong family but suppress the Su family. The Zhong family had a deep-seated hatred with Chu and thus would never betray you to join Chu. So he said, Su's territories, after all, do not border Chu, and Zhong Yao's army of over 100,000 is stationed to the north of Su Nan. If the Su family dares to revolt, Zhong Yao can march south at any time and annihilate them. Shen Lang shook his head. Your Majesty, I think there is a common misunderstanding. Everyone assumes Chong is Chong and Su is Su. But what if, at a critical moment, Su and Chong become one? By then, wouldn't it directly border Chu? Sovereign's pupils suddenly contracted. Impossible. Chong King is so domineering, he would never submit to anyone, and Su Nan, with all his schemes, how could he pledge loyalty to Chong King? Shen Lang did not argue but calmly said, Your Majesty, to be on the safe side, I think it's necessary to place Su Nan under house arrest. At this, Sovereign faced a difficult choice. If Su Nan were arrested now, the situation might spiral out of control, but if what Shen Lang said was true, the consequences could be even more unbearable. What we need most now is time to buffer. After a moment of contemplation, Sovereign decisively ordered, Someone, order additional manpower for Blackwater platform to monitor the distant guard Marquis mansion. No one from the Su family, not even a servant, is allowed to leave the capital city. Meanwhile, Chong King Aragang had died suddenly as planned by Shen Lang. However, within just a quarter of an hour of his death, the entire Chong nation plunged into chaos. The princes, vying for the throne and wealth, completely disregarded Aragang's corpse and cause of death. They were only concerned with their own interests, turning Chong King's great hall into a bloody battlefield, and Aragang's body was left abandoned in the grand hall where he died, with no one to care. This scene truly exemplified the saying, as arrogant in life, as lamentable in death. As the royal palace of Chong was engulfed in battle, a little eunuch planted by Shen Lang secretly ran to the haystacks outside the palace and started sending secret signals. Shortly after, a man dressed as a monk quickly appeared. Seeing the newcomer, the eunuch hurriedly pulled out a note and handed it over, saying, Hurry back to capital city, report to the Grand Overseer. Chong King is dead. The country is in great turmoil. This letter contains detailed intelligence, and it's crucial that the Grand Overseer personally delivers this letter to His Majesty. After hearing this, the man knew the situation was serious and immediately rode at full speed towards capital city. However, even so, this message was still 2 hours slower than Su's secret letter. The timeline returns to the distant guard Marquis mansion. At this point, upon learning of Chong King's sudden death, Su Nan slumped down, his expression filled with despair. Why has this happened? Aragang, that scoundrel, has been blackmailing me all my life. He indeed deserved to die, but he should not have died at this moment. I was just one step away from success. Why did it happen so suddenly? At this moment, Su Nan's rage erupted like a volcanic explosion, no longer able to be contained. A beast-like roar burst from his mouth. His face twisted, he clenched his fists, gathered the true energy inside his body, and then violently smashed it into the wall. Instantly, debris flew everywhere. Under his continuous, frenzied venting, the wall, as sturdy as a fortress, along with the windows, was completely blown to rubble. After venting, Su Nan forced himself to calm down. He thought, after preparing for so long, am I really going to give up now? I, Su Nan, will not admit defeat so easily. Then, he turned his head, and addressing Su Yong, who was trembling like a sieve in fear, he ordered, "Go light the signal candle. Give the order to start the operation." Night fell, and the messenger finally arrived at Blackwater platform. When the Grand Overseer saw the contents of the letter, he was utterly shocked and, disregarding everything else, hurried towards the palace. Meanwhile, in the inner palace, due to issues with Su Nan, Sovereign had not visited Consort Su recently and had been staying in Consort Bien's palace. At this moment, Sovereign, listening to Consort Bien's breathing as she slept soundly, was himself sleepless due to heavy thoughts. The worst-case scenario Shen Lang had analyzed during the day kept circling in his mind. He was still debating whether to immediately take down Su Nan, but with no final decision yet on whether Chong King would send troops. Any rash action could provoke a tremendous upheaval. Just then, a notification from Li Ji came from outside the door. "Your Majesty, the Grand Overseer requests an audience." Sovereign was startled and then quickly sat up. He thought, Yane, this dark enforcer, rarely leaves the Blackwater platform. His visit to the palace so late at night. Could something significant have happened? A quarter of an hour later, Yane met with Sovereign in the side hall. He bowed and said, "A spy has reported that Chong King suddenly died. Chong country is now in total chaos." Upon hearing this, Sovereign was incredulous and stood stunned. Seeing this, Yane immediately presented the secret letter. Sovereign gradually recovered from his shock. He felt as if a massive weight had been lifted from his chest, and a smile unconsciously appeared on his lips. "I never expected such a momentous joy at this crucial time. Truly a blessing for me, Ming Yuan Xian." But the next second, his suspicious nature instinctively kicked in. Could this information be false? Yane shook his head and said, "No." After I received the news, the signal candle on the high platform of the distant guard Marquis mansion was also lit, clearly a gesture meant to convey important information to certain people. Hearing this, Sovereign's expression darkened, and he turned to Li Ji to ask, "Is Su Nan still here? Is he still at his mansion at this moment?" Li Ji hurriedly replied, "Your Majesty, Blackwater platform spies report that Su Nan is currently sitting alone in the courtyard, solving a chess puzzle." Sovereign frowned deeply and then waved his hand to give an order. "Yane, listen to my command. Immediately deploy 3,000 troops to surround the distant guard Marquis mansion and capture Su Nan. Li Ji, you assist Yane. Close all 4 gates of the capital city. No one is permitted to enter or leave. Inside the Su family, even if it's just a dog, do not let it escape." A quarter of an hour later, 3,000 Blackwater platform warriors rushed towards the distant guard Marquis mansion like a tidal wave, soon completely besieging it. At this time, Li Ji stepped forward and asked, "Is Su Nan still in the courtyard?" A gatekeeper from the Blackwater platform replied, "He seems to have sensed something. Although he is still ostensibly studying the chess puzzle in the courtyard, he has not made a move for a long time." Hearing this, Li Ji nodded and said, Let's go in and arrest him." As soon as he finished speaking, several warriors carrying torches and wielding large swords burst into the mansion. Following them were a solemn Yane and Li Ji. Upon arriving in the courtyard, the guards had already surrounded Su Nan. However, the old man was still hunched over, looking fearlessly at the chessboard in front of him. Seeing this, Li Ji approached and said, "Elder Su, the dew is heavy at midnight. Let me take you somewhere else." Hearing this, Su Nan slowly raised his head and asked with an aged voice, "Uniquely, where are you taking me?" Li Ji did not rush to answer, but leisurely said, "Blackwater platform or the Court of Judicial Review. Feel free to choose one." Su Nan sneered softly, saying, "Uniquely, why is it that I can't understand what you're saying? I, Su Nan, am just playing chess in the courtyard. Have I done something wrong?" Li Ji stared at the eerie smile on Su Nan's face under the candlelight, suddenly startled. "No, this is not Su Nan." Although this old man's face looked exactly like Su Nan's, Li Ji knew well that the real Su Nan emitted an aura like a cold, venomous snake, chilling to the core. The person before him lacked that bone-chilling presence. Immediately, Li Ji pointed at him, trembling, and shouted harshly, "You are not Su Nan. You are his body double, aren't you?" The old man lifted his head and chuckled. "Yes and no. On the contrary, he is always imitating my every move." Upon hearing this, Li Ji suddenly realized the fact that Su Nan disguised as an old man was actually well known to everyone. He wasn't much older than Sovereign, but his long-term portrayal as frail and elderly had taken root in people's hearts, making him appear like a man in his 70s or 80s. This strong psychological impression had made everyone forget his true face. At this moment, suppressing the discomfort in his heart, Li Ji continued to ask, "If Su Nan left you here, then it means he has already abandoned you. Now tell the truth. Where is Su Nan gone?" The body double slowly began. "Don't waste your effort. Do you really think you can catch the master? That's utterly fantastical." Saying this, he seemed to accidentally knock the candlestick on the table to the ground. The moment the candle touched the floor, fierce flames burst forth around the body double. Surrounded by flames, the Su Nan double showed no sign of pain. Instead, he burst into loud laughter. This act shocked everyone present. Li Ji, puzzled, murmured to himself, could this be Su Nan's contingency plan to create chaos, facilitating his escape? Even so, he couldn't possibly escape from Capital City unless, just as Li Ji was about to grasp a crucial piece of information, a guard rushed in, breathlessly reporting, Sir, it's bad. Multiple residences within capital city are on fire. Please follow us to a safe place immediately. Li Ji was completely shocked. Indeed, Su Nan, that old thief, is truly ruthless for his own schemes. In that instant, several key locations within capital city simultaneously suffered massive explosions. In no time, the entire capital city was engulfed in flames. At that moment, Yane also realized Su Nan's intention. His face ashen, he bellowed, "All warriors of Blackwater platform, to your posts immediately and secure the Vermilion Bird Gate." Meanwhile, on the palace walls, Sovereign, accompanied by the Crown Prince and the Third Prince, looked complexly at the city ablaze like a sea of fire. All the soldiers of capital city had poured out to fight the fire, striving to maintain order among the citizens. Nevertheless, the sudden, catastrophic blaze plunged the entire capital city into unprecedented chaos. Listening to the countless cries of anguish and despair from the people around him, Sovereign felt furious yet powerless. He understood that Su Nan had escaped again, but what he couldn't comprehend was, if Su Nan could have escaped through a secret tunnel, why did he need to harm the citizens and cause such a massive uproar? Beside him, the Crown Prince said anxiously, "Father, Su Nan is ruthless and mad. His actions are clearly a show of defiance against you." Hearing this, Ning Yuanxian chuckled coldly inside. At this point, how could he not understand Su Nan's intentions? This old thief had always played the role of a docile dog in front of him, but now he could no longer restrain himself, revealing his fangs, wanting to turn back into a fierce wolf. But even so, what could be done? "Su Nan, aren't you still going to run away like a rat burrowing into a hole?" However, to everyone's surprise, the real Su Nan did not flee. He shed his disguise and appeared in his true form in capital city. Dressed in soft armor, wielding a long spear, he rode majestically on a horse. At this moment, all wrinkles on his face had disappeared, and his white-dyed hair framed his stern and domineering face, exuding a unique aura. This was undoubtedly Su Nan at his peak. At that moment, he swiftly controlled his horse, racing toward the Vermilion Bird Gate. Along the way, rebels who had been lying in wait within capital city joined him one by one, quickly forming a cavalry unit of 100 riders. Simultaneously, during this turbulent time, the guards on the Vermilion Avenue noticed the distant cavalry. The lead guard immediately ordered the troops to gather quickly and prepare for battle. The guard stepped forward and loudly asked, "Which division's cavalry are you? Report your unit number immediately." However, Su Nan did not deign to respond. Instead, he shouted loudly, "Charge!" As soon as his command fell, the 100 warriors behind him swiftly overcame the obstructing army, inflicting heavy casualties. By the time they reached the Vermilion Bird Gate, the archers on the gate had already prepared for defense. The leading guard commander bellowed, "Who goes there? Surrender immediately!" But before he could finish demonstrating his authority, Su Nan raised his long spear and hurled it toward the top of the gate. In the blink of an eye, the spear had pierced through his skull, nailing him to the wall behind. Then, Su Nan drew a large sword and roared with authority, "I am the great bandit Kutuhuan. Anyone who dares to stop me will only find death." Before his words had even faded, the archers on the gate began their assault. However, Su Nan merely sneered and, leading his warriors, charged toward the gate through a hail of arrows. With his own strength, he slaughtered all 100 soldiers guarding the gate, leaving no survivors. Within less than a quarter of an hour, they had breached the Vermilion Bird Gate. However, just after breaking out of the city gate, Su Nan deliberately laughed back. "Is this the defense of the capital of Yu Kingdom? Kutuhuan enter and exit so easily. It's practically like no one's land. Yu Kingdom is so weak, it cannot withstand a single blow." Su Nan sneered, then led his troops away without looking back. A quarter of an hour after Su Nan and his men had left, Yane arrived at the Vermilion Bird Gate with the Blackwater platform army. Seeing the dead and wounded soldiers scattered everywhere in the direction in which Su Nan had escaped, he furrowed his brows and muttered, "Too late, a bloody battle is soon to come." Thinking this, he turned back and shouted, "I must report this to Sovereign. You continue to pursue the rebel Su Nan." Moments later, Yane knelt before Sovereign and said solemnly, "Su Nan, under the guise of Kutuhuan, has boldly broken out of Vermilion Bird Gate and fled." Upon hearing this, Sovereign's body shook with anger and shock. He murmured to himself, "Su Nan didn't flee quietly, but made a grand exit through the Vermilion Bird Gate. Was he only trying to trample on my dignity, to humiliate the national prestige of Yu Kingdom? No." Suddenly, a terrifying thought flashed through his mind. He spoke gravely. "He is signaling to Chu and Wu that Yu Kingdom is now extremely weak." Su Nan, with just a few hundred men, was able to move in and out of capital city at will. This is also a way for him to fight for fame and power. It seems that the Su family has never been merely about vying for a place in the court. What he wants is to rise up the Su family and become the new overlord. At this moment, Sovereign fully understood the deep meaning of Su-Chong unity as explained by Shen Lang. Every year, the three-eyed evil captures Yu Kingdom citizens to supply as slaves to Chong. Su Nan provides endless funds to Chong King, forging ties. Moreover, numerous Su family spies have been sent to Chong over the years. However, Chong King's greed has always made it difficult for Su Nan to fully control him. Now, Chong King's sudden death has instead provided Su Nan with a perfect opportunity. This turn of events could better support Crown Prince Arutai as the new puppet. Once Arutai Urutai eliminates his other brothers and claims the throne. True Su-Chong unity could be achieved. Meanwhile, inside the royal palace of Chong King's body was already crawling with flies, and the bodies left behind from the fight for power were also left uncleaned. At this moment, the entire grand hall was filled with a thick stench of decay. In Chong King's room, the new King Urutai was lying leisurely on his bed, smoking a cigarette after the event. Nestled in his arms were the former Queen Su Mo and the former Queen Consort, Su Ning. However, this did not violate the traditions of Chong. In Chong, once the former king dies, everything he owned, including his women, belongs to the successor. After finishing his cigarette, Urutai suddenly asked Su Mo, "You were my father's wife. Now that my father has passed away, how do you think his funeral should be conducted?" Su Mo lazily answered, "Just perform a sky burial, according to the traditions of the former kings." Urutai nodded in satisfaction, then said, "My brothers who have fled have gathered more than 10,000 people and taken over the original temple, intending to confront me. How should I break this situation?" After hearing this, Su Mo smiled seductively and softly said, "Let me take care of them. I believe they won't be wary of me, a frail woman." Earlier, everyone at the Jin family's separate residence, as per Shen Lang's prior arrangements, had already prepared for defense. At this time, Jin Mutsung nervously clutched his sword, inquiring about Shen 13's current situation. Shen 13 comforted him, "Young master, don't worry. Since Su Nan has left capital city, it should be temporarily safe here. But if we go by the master's analysis of the situation, it's likely that Su Nan won't easily let our Jin family off." However, before Shen 13 could finish, suddenly several barrels fell from the sky, crashing into the courtyard. As the barrels hit the ground, fish oil splashed out from them. Before everyone could recover from the shock, dozens of rockets fell from the sky. In an instant, when the oil met fire, the flames erupted violently. Seeing this, Shen 13 made a split-second decision and shouted to Huang Feng, "Huang Feng, prepare the water tanks and wet blankets, and immediately escort the young master and little Bing into the underground chamber." As everyone was evacuating, Jin Mutsung suddenly noticed that Big Fool was still standing alone outside. He hurriedly urged, "Big Fool, come and hide with us quickly." However, Big Fool tearfully shook his head, saying, "I want to stay and help brother Shen 13 protect everyone, but I only know how to take hits, not to fight. What should I do now?" Having already reached the entrance to the passage, Little Bing stopped, turned around, and looked at Big Fool. Little Bing said directly, "Big Fool, look at my stomach. Inside is young Master Shen's child, your nephew. Now that bad people are coming to harm him, you should stand up to protect him. What you need to do is pick up a weapon and fiercely kill these bad people, understand?" After hearing Little Bing's words, Big Fool was instantly invigorated, shouting excitedly, "I will kill all these bad guys. I will protect my nephew." Just then, several masked experts consecutively leaped into the courtyard from the outer wall. The leader was wearing the distinctive mask of Ku Tuhuan. Once they landed, they headed straight toward Shen 13 and Big Fool, who also immediately prepared for battle. Suddenly, the leader removed his mask, sneering, "You probably know we are from the Su family, so I'll take off this mask. I am Su Nan's adopted son, Su Jianyan, sent by my foster father to exterminate Shen Lang's family and to take Jin Mutsung. If you two are wise enough to step aside, maybe I'll spare your lives." Upon hearing this, Shen 13 raised his curved blade without hesitation, coldly saying, "Step aside? Don't even think about it. My life was given by young Master Shen. I might as well die here tonight." Su Jianyan, hearing this, raised his knife towards him, sneering, "So you must be Shen Lang's dog." Shen 13, "Ha, with your mediocre martial skills, you can at most block my 3 strikes. Since you're so ungrateful, then you and the idiot behind you can die together." With that, Su Jianyan charged aggressively toward them. Meanwhile, on a nearby street, Flame Emperor Nation's envoy Yunmengza was riding a horse, racing toward the Jin family's separate residence. When he received the news of Su Nan's escape from capital city, he suspected that the old thief wouldn't easily let go of Shen Lang's family. At this moment, all he hoped was that he could arrive in time to help. If something happened to Jin Mutsung and the child in Little Bing's womb, he didn't know how he'd explain it to Shen Lang. When he reached the Jin family's separate residence and saw the fierce flames engulfing it, his heart sank. Am I too late? Suddenly, he noticed numerous twisted and deformed bodies scattered in a corner. Their grisly state of death made him furrow his brow. What on earth happened here? Just as he was trying to figure it out, he suddenly sensed a strong killing intent from behind. A huge shadow roared and charged at him with such speed that he barely had time to react. In a critical moment, Shen 13 rushed out, shouting, "Big Fool, stop. That's Yunmengza. He's one of us." However, it was a step too late. Yunmengza could only try his best to dodge to the side. Big Fool's heavy iron sword came crashing down, smashing the spot where Yunmengza had just been. At this moment, Yunmengza, with a face still in shock, looked at the ground, his heart racing with fear. If that sword had hit me, I wouldn't have fared any better than those bodies outside. Big Fool's eyes were bloodshot as he approached Yunmengza. Yunmengza, terrified, shouted, "Stop! Big Fool, it's me! I'm Yunmengza." Only after Yunmengza repeated his name 3 times did Big Fool gradually calm the fury in his eyes. As he returned to his usual guileless demeanor, he looked around confusedly and asked Yunmengza, "Where are the bad guys? Brother Yun, did you scare them all away?" Yunmengza Yunmengza, looking at the bodies strewn around, couldn't help but twitch his lips. Big Fool had selectively ignored the bloody scene, unaware that he had killed so many people. Yunmengza then stepped forward, smiling, and said to Big Fool, "Yes, all the bad guys got scared away. You better go check if the fatty got scared enough to pee himself." Hearing this, Big Fool nodded dumbly. "Okay, I'll go check on Third Fool. Go see Second Fool's baby." Under the watchful eyes of Yunmengza and Shen 13, Big Fool entered the secret passage. After getting rid of Big Fool, Yunmengza eagerly asked Shen 13, "What on earth happened here?" Shen 13 sighed and explained, "Su Nan's adopted son, Su Jianyan, originally came with a group of skilled fighters to ambush us. But when Big Fool heard that Su Jianyan wanted to kill the master's child, he went berserk. Although Su Jianyan is very strong, he was no match for Big Fool. Not only was his sword smashed, but he himself was also seriously injured. The other fighters tried to help him, but were indiscriminately killed by Big Fool." Yunmengza was shocked and asked, "What happened to Su Jianyan?" Shen 13 continued, "Later, during the chaos, Su Jianyan somehow escaped." Listening to Shen 13's account, Yunmengza was taken aback. When Big Fool struck, did he use any particular techniques? Shen 13 spread his hands and said with a wry smile, "He just flailed around like a madwoman." After saying this, he couldn't help but shed tears of frustration. "Yunmengza, I suddenly feel that my decades of martial arts training seem pointless." Yunmengza patted his shoulder and sighed. "It's not just you who thinks that, I do too." At the same time, in the inner court of Yu Kingdom, Consort Su and the 6th Prince Ning Jing were anxiously thinking of strategies. Consort Su never expected that her brother, who always doted on her, would disregard her well-being completely for the ambition of the Su family. Now that her own brother had turned capital city upside down, her fate could only be death. Just then, the sovereign suddenly appeared at Consort Su's door. The mother and son trembled at his sight. Regaining her composure, Consort Su immediately got up and rushed forward, trying to appear weak and fall into the sovereign's arms. However, she was stopped by an eunuch before she could reach the sovereign. "Please do not rush towards his majesty." Consort Su was stunned, her heart immediately filled with resentment. "Look at you, Lian, usually so submissive to me. Now, before the sovereign has even spoken, you dare to stop me." Seeing this, the sovereign casually gave Lian a look and then coldly said, "How come you've learned from your master to flatter some and step on others?" After hearing this, Lian quickly retreated to the back, outwardly respectful but inwardly pleased. The emperor's words were not a reprimand, but rather a compliment. At this moment, Consort Su, putting aside her inner grievances, threw herself on the ground in front of the sovereign, crying out, "Your Majesty, I truly did not know why my brother would commit such a treacherous act. I know, being a daughter of the Su family, I cannot escape responsibility. I only ask your Majesty to leave my body intact, and for Ning Jing, he is your son, the flesh and blood of the Ning family. Please do not blame him." Hearing Consort Su's plea, Ning Jing, originally intending to denounce Su Nan, immediately knelt down, pleading, "Father, I do not wish to live alone. I am willing to share my mother's punishment." Just then, they heard the sovereign laugh heartily. "My dear, you are exaggerating. Lord Su has done no wrong." The sovereign then bent down to gently caress Consort Su's face, continuing, "I have already investigated. The attack on mythical Turtle Count's mansion was indeed carried out by the notorious bandit Kutuoan. As Lord Su said, this incident has nothing to do with Su Jianteng." Consort Su was stunned, full of confusion. Why did the sovereign not mention her brother's treason at all? The sovereign, as if reading her thoughts, said softly, "My dear, don't be nervous. We have been married for over 20 years, and even if you make minor mistakes on ordinary days, how could I bear to punish you? Stop worrying." The sovereign then turned to Lian and said, "Notify all 6 palaces. Tonight I will stay in Consort Su's palace." Hearing that the sovereign planned to stay the night, Ning Jing became even more frightened. "This is it. If today my father became enraged and punished me and my mother, there might still be a chance for redemption. But now he plans to stay overnight. What are we to do?" As dawn broke the next day, the sovereign got up and donned his dragon robe, tenderly instructed Consort Su before preparing to leave. Just then, a voice from a young eunuch came from outside. "Your Majesty, the mighty Duke requests an urgent audience." This mighty Duke Bian Shao share a fraternal bond with Ning Yuanxian. In the past, it was Ning Yuanxian, then the Crown Prince of Yu Kingdom, who with Bian Shao orchestrated the glamorous province upheaval and led Bian Shao with his army of 100,000 to defect to Yu Kingdom, directly resulting in a major defeat for Wu. Moments later, in the sovereign's study, mighty Duke Bian Shao performed a bow and said, "Your Majesty, I rushed to the palace overnight after learning of Su Nan's treason last night. May I ask what your plans are?" At this, the sovereign put aside his imperial authority and sighed, "Brother, you've worked hard. Although we had already been on guard against Su Nan, I still underestimated him. Fortunately, this old thief will need time to rally his forces now that he's back in his domain. This gives us a golden opportunity to strike unexpectedly. First, I need you to lead an attack on Wu. However, due to the ongoing war with Southern Ouyang, Yu Kingdom's treasury cannot sustain 2 large-scale wars. Therefore, this war must be small in scale but spectacular in results. We must show our strength to the neighboring countries to achieve a deterrent effect." After pondering for a moment, Bian Shao responded, "Your Majesty is wise. We have conducted such small small-scale wars before, and indeed they were very effective. However, the new King of Wu, though young, is a formidable character and might not be so easily deceived. Hearing this, the sovereign's expression darkened, and he declared, "Then I shall personally take the field. I'll pretend to stage a decisive battle between the kings of Wu and you, thus tying down Wu's main army. During this time, you can take the opportunity to launch a surprise attack with a small elite force." Bian Shao was startled by this proposal and exclaimed, "Your Majesty, this is too risky. Such an action is absolutely not advisable. In these critical times, with Su Nan's significant influence in the court, if you leave capital city, it might cause instability." However, Ning Yuanxian simply chuckled coldly, "No matter. Those officials who cling to Su Nan are rootless trees. They appear formidable but are inwardly frail and easiest to deal with. If they are stubbornly foolish, then a harsh purge will suffice. Civil officials are like chives in a garden. Even if a batch is cut down, others will quickly sprout up to replace them." Sovereign's tone was calm and confident. Bian Shao, after listening, remained silent, internally remarking, "This is the Ning Yuanxian I know, decisive and ruthless at critical moments, never dragging his feet." Whether this trait was a strength or a flaw, he wondered. Since the sovereign was so bold as to act as bait to draw Wu's main forces, how could Bian Shao hesitate? Resolving himself, he saluted and accepted the command. "Rest assured, Your Majesty, I will devote all my efforts to not fail your trust and accomplish this critical task." The next day in the court, the sovereign officially began his Imperial wrath performance. His angry roar echoed throughout the hall. "How audacious of Wu to march south and even dream of attacking our Weno city. Now, Wu has even planted spies within capital city, colluding with bandits to set fires everywhere, causing the deaths and injuries of thousands of Yu Kingdom citizens and the destruction of hundreds of homes. As the ruler of Yu Kingdom, if I cannot protect our borders and people, how can I face our ancestors?" With the sovereign's roar falling, most of the civil officials in the hall trembled with fear. Although the sovereign did not mention Su Nan last night, they all intuitively thought that the sovereign was using the pretext of colluding with Wu to start purging Su Nan's supporters. Suddenly, the sovereign asked in a cold voice, "Zhong-yi, why is Su Nan not in court today? Where is he?" Zhong-yi stepped forward and bowed, replying, "I do not know. However, last night the distant guard Marquis's mansion caught fire, and I heard the blaze was exceptionally fierce, destroying much of the Marquis's residence. Marquis Su, being old, might have been shocked and hence did not come today." After hearing this, the sovereign's expression showed a hint of surprise, and he instructed Li Ji, "Quickly send the Imperial physician to distant guard Marquis's mansion to take a look. Su Nan has worked hard for the kingdom. Nothing must happen to her." After Li Ji left, the officials in the hall were stunned. Didn't we hear that Su Nan was a traitor who escaped last night? What does the sovereign's action mean now? As the officials were left in confusion, the sovereign suddenly turned and asked, "The Wu King's 30,000-strong army is already approaching Weno City. You've been discussing it for days. Isn't it time to give me a decision?" As soon as his words fell, the hall became deathly silent. The sovereign sneered and said, "It seems that even if I give you 3 or 5 more years, you still wouldn't come to a conclusion. In that case, I'll personally lead the army. The new King of Wu is nothing but a brat, daring to provoke the might of our great Yu Kingdom. Does he think I'm too old to fight? Let him see for himself just how brave and invincible I am on the battlefield." The moment these words were spoken, the officials were shocked. Those who had been silent before immediately kneeled, trying to stop the sovereign's rash move. However, the sovereign ignored their advice. He stood up, threw off his dragon robe, and revealed the imposing golden armor beneath. He then drew the sword from his waist and, turning, swung it fiercely at the dragon desk, instantly splitting the entire desk in half. This action instantly sent a chill through the officials, who trembled in fear. Seeing this, the sovereign barked, "I've made up my mind. I'll personally lead the troops to battle to fight the King of Wu. Anyone who tries to stop me will be executed." An hour later, in the sovereign's study, Shen Lang sat leisurely at the desk eating pastries, not mentioning a word about the fire at his home the previous night. After thinking for a while, the sovereign decided to bypass the matter and said, "Shen Lang, you're quite something. You're good at reading people's hearts. It seems that Su Nan truly harbored grand ambitions, attempting to crown himself as king." Shen Lang smiled, put down the pastry in his hand, and replied, "I've been trying to eliminate this old man for the sake of my family, so naturally, I understand his thoughts better than anyone else." The sovereign glanced at Shen Lang and continued, "Shen Lang, if you were to execute the new policy, what would you do?" Shen Lang casually picked up another pastry and looked at the sovereign, saying, "If it were up to me, I would immediately cut down the old noble families to the roots, eliminating all future threats." The sovereign's lips twitched slightly, and he snorted, "Don't forget, the Jin family is also an old noble family." Shen Lang didn't mind, smiling as he said, "The new policy's sword was once hanging over my family's head, so I had no choice but to resist with all my might. The Jin family's foundation was built by my ancestors through blood and battle, not something granted by the previous king. However, as long as it doesn't affect the Jin family, I'll fully support it. Not only that, I'm willing to help your majesty strategize, removing all obstacles in your way, and double the treasury and military power, making Yu Kingdom stand out in the southern nation's struggle." Hearing Shen Lang's words, the sovereign couldn't help but laugh and scold, "You're truly vulgar. The new policy is meant to benefit the nation and the people, yet in your mouth, it becomes a tool for the king to pursue personal gain. At this point, the sovereign's smile gradually faded and his tone turned serious. Shen Lang, would you dare to go to Su Nan's territory, distant guard city? Shen Lang wiped his mouth with a handkerchief and replied indifferently, why wouldn't I? I've sworn to eradicate the Su family. There's not a good person in that family. They all deserve to die. Upon hearing this, the sovereign shook his head and smiled. I'm not expecting you alone to destroy the Su family. I only need you to keep an eye on them. Use any means necessary, as long as you can restrain the Su family and prevent them from openly plotting rebellion within 2 months. Shen Lang felt speechless inside. What does stabilize the Su family mean? If the Su family isn't eradicated within 2 months, won't I be going back on my word in front of Milan? However, the sovereign didn't notice his expression and directly said, prepare yourself in the next few days. Soon, I'll issue an order to send you to distant guard city. When you return, I will reward you handsomely. Shen Lang wasn't one to take empty promises. He boldly asked, what exactly do you intend to reward me with? The sovereign felt speechless inside. The task isn't even completed, and this kid's already asking for rewards. But he still allowed Shen Lang to state his request. Shen Lang suddenly became serious and said, I only have one request. Please, Your Majesty, treat 5th Prince Ningjing fairly. Now, all the other adult princes have been given titles and territories, but 5th Prince still has nothing. Upon hearing this, the sovereign furrowed his brows slightly and coldly asked, Shen Lang, do you know what your position is? How dare you interfere in my family matters? Do you truly think you can get away with this? On the day Su Nan was preparing to burn down capital city, Shen Lang had already calculated the old thief's escape route. He privately sent a secret letter to Li Qianqiu, instructing him to disguise himself and lie in ambush 150 miles southwest of Lang County at the 10,000 Mountains post. At that moment, the post's stables were loudly commanding the old farmers to sort the hay. Judging by the tone, it seemed a big figure would be arriving soon to change horses. Li Qianqiu was hidden among the old farmers, silently arranging the hay. At this point, he was actually feeling a bit conflicted. Although he was the Southern Sea Sword King, his ancestors had been farmers for generations, so he always felt a bit inferior whenever he saw high-ranking officials. Now, he had been entrusted by Shen Lang to assassinate Su Nan. Although it wasn't an incredibly difficult task, he still felt uncertain. However, Shen Lang had promised that this mission was approved by the sovereign, so he could only secretly hope this slippery fellow better not be lying to me. The timeline shifts back to the Yu Kingdom Palace. At this moment, the sovereign was in a rage, furious over Shen Lang's attempt to support 5th Prince Ningjing. Shen Lang, you little brat, you're getting more and more audacious. Now you even want to interfere in my family matters. Li Ji, throw this little bastard out. Thus, Shen Lang was thrown out of the sovereign's study with great force. Shen Lang got up, holding his face with a pitiful expression as he looked at Li Ji. Li eunuch, couldn't you be a bit gentler? What if my handsome face gets hurt? After saying that, Shen Lang stood up, dusted off his clothes, and then, with a deep gaze, looked toward the western side of the palace, muttering to himself, Sword King, everything on my side is in place. I hope everything goes smoothly on your end. Don't chicken out, and don't let your hands shake. That evening, the traitor Su Nan, leading a few hundred men, finally arrived at the 10,000 Mountains post. After a continuous night and day of frantic running, not only were the men exhausted, but the horses were also on the verge of collapse. If they didn't rest, they would drop dead. Su Nan, thinking he was now on his own turf, called for Su Yong and ordered, go notify the brothers to rest here for an hour. However, they must remain alert at all times and only eat and drink the food we brought. After giving these instructions, Su Nan's nerves relaxed slightly. He reflected on the deployment of his forces. Although Shen Lang had disrupted the pace of things, causing the Su family and Chu Kingdom's negotiations to fall into a passive position and resulting in some losses, the overall situation remained unchanged. The encirclement of Yu Kingdom from all sides was still proceeding in an orderly manner. The Su family's rise to power had already become a certainty. He sneered to himself, when a Rutai leads the Chong army into the western celestial province, the first to be eliminated will definitely be the Jin family. As for Ning Yuanxian, maybe I won't even have to say anything. He'll personally send Shen Lang's head to me. Soon, hundreds of exhausted knights entered the station and dismounted for rest. Just then, the previously clear sky suddenly became overcast with clouds, darkening. Su Nan looked up at the sky, feeling an inexplicable unease. He turned around and saw, in the corner of the station, about a dozen old farmers leisurely cutting grass. The stable hands were also helping the soldiers water and feed the horses, everything seeming calm and normal. But why did it feel like something was off? As Su Nan scanned the surroundings again, his gaze fixed on one old farmer in the corner who was cutting grass, Li Qianqiu. The moment their eyes met, Su Nan's eyelids twitched violently. Yes, the problem was him. Realizing this, Su Nan immediately shouted, seize that old farmer. As his words fell, several warriors instantly drew their swords and surrounded Li Qianqiu. However, Li Qianqiu just sighed, calmly putting down the sickle. The next second, his gaze turned icy, and he switched into combat mode. Seeing this, Su Nan didn't stay any longer. As the warriors charged at Li Qianqiu, he quickly turned his horse and and dashed out of the station. Li Qianqiu tore off the sickle in his hand and, with a mere flash, took down the warriors in front of him. He didn't pause, immediately chasing after Su Nan with such speed that even Su Nan couldn't believe. Seeing Li Qianqiu getting closer, Su Nan stopped running, turned his horse around, and charged forward. The next second, their weapons clashed, sparking flames. Su Nan yelled, "Li Qianqiu, I have no quarrel with you. Why ambush me?" Li Qianqiu didn't respond, just stared coldly at him. Then, with a build-up of force, the two were suddenly repelled by a massive shock. Su Nan shook his heavy iron spear and roared, "Li Qianqiu, are you seeking death?" As he spoke, his spear gathered force, and the spearhead, like a vortex, shot straight towards Li Qianqiu. In a flash of light, a clanging sound was heard, and Li Qianqiu's sickle shattered into pieces. Seeing this, Li Qianqiu quickly stepped back to dodge the afterforce of the spear. He looked down at the broken sickle and muttered to himself, as expected, this mere iron can't withstand such force. Then, he steadied himself and pulled a wooden stick from his waist. As Su Nan's spear attacked again, Li Qianqiu ducked and in a flash was next to Su Nan, stabbing at him with the wooden stick. The moment the stick touched Su Nan, it violently broke into pieces. At this time, Su Nan was frozen like he was under a spell, unable to move. Li Qianqiu quickly moved to a safe distance. At that moment, Su Nan's reinforcement soldiers arrived. Seeing this, Li Qianqiu no longer lingered, leapt up, and quickly fled the scene. The soldiers wanted to pursue, but Su Nan stopped them. "Don't chase. Even if you catch him, you're no match for him." Su Nan paused, suppressing the taste of blood in his throat, then turned to ask, "Has everyone rested well? If so, fill your water bottles with hot water and let's continue on our way." Su Nan continued westward with hundreds of people. However, all along the way, he kept a water bottle tightly in his hand. But he wasn't drinking water. Instead, he was continuously spitting blood into it. Yes, he was injured. Li Qianqiu had used just a wooden stick to pierce his chest. If not for using his inner strength to seal the wound, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The next day, after a night of fleeing, Su Nan finally safely returned to his family's territory. The first thing he did upon returning was to send a letter of apology to the sovereign. The letter stated that he was old, weak, and sickly, and therefore wished to resign from all his duties and retire. After reading the letter, the sovereign sneered, but outwardly showed a very cooperative and heartbroken demeanor. After several refusals, he finally agreed to Su Nan's resignation. However, just 2 hours after Su Nan resigned, the Blackwater platform was ordered to mobilize in full force. They arrested all direct descendants and family members of the Su family in the capital city, accusing Su Nan of colluding with Wu and harming the people of the Yu kingdom. At the execution ground, Li Ji proclaimed a decree, and the Su family was executed. That evening, the sovereign summoned Shen Lang and Zhang Chong. He spoke solemnly, "I am about to set off to confront the king of Wu. The affairs of the Western Celestial Province will be entrusted to you too. I hope you will not disappoint me." After speaking, he glanced at Shen Lang. This young man is always so carefree and improper, truly a concern. Thinking this, he turned to Zhang Chong and said, "There's only one task for this mission. Until the situation in the north is clear, use whatever means necessary to keep Su Nan stable and ensure he stays within White Knight County. If Su Nan's rebels step even half a step east, your heads will be at stake. Understand?" Zhang Chong, understanding the sovereign's intention, immediately expressed his commitment to fulfill this heavy responsibility. The sovereign nodded and continued, "Lord Zhang, if you succeed in this mission, the position of Glamorous Province subordinate commander will be yours." After hearing this, Zhang Chong immediately knelt and thanked him for his gracious favor. Suddenly, the sovereign shouted, "Shen Lang, present." Shen Lang was startled by the sudden shout. The sovereign warned, "I know you want to seek revenge on Su Nan, but you must stabilize the Su family first. Once I have dealt with the troubles in the north, I will help you annihilate them. Remember, do not act rashly. Follow all orders from Zhang Chong. Understood?" Shen Lang inwardly sneered but respectfully agreed outwardly to the sovereign. Then, Zhang Chong stepped forward and asked, "Your Majesty, how many troops can I take with me?" The sovereign coughed lightly and replied, 3,000 elite troops. What? Hearing this number, both Shen Lang and Zhang Chong were shocked. It was a joke. They were heading to Su Nan's stronghold, facing an army of 20 to 30,000. If it came to a combined force situation, that would be even more enormous. 3,000 troops were simply a death mission. Seeing their troubled expressions, the sovereign's face immediately turned cold. Not enough? These 3,000 troops were squeezed out from between my teeth. Upon hearing this, Zhang Chong and Shen Lang exchanged a glance and reluctantly accepted the assignment. Li Ji then read the Imperial decree, appointing Zhang Chong as the military governor of the Western Celestial Province and the prefect of White Knight County. Shen Lang was appointed as the Lord of Distant Guard City. They were to take office 3 days later. Moments later, after receiving their orders, the two did not speak a single word until they had left the palace. Once outside the palace gates, Shen Lang suddenly said, "Lord Zhang, I have a matter I wish to discuss with you." Zhang Chong was startled. Then Shen Lang continued, "In the field, military orders are sometimes not obeyed. His Majesty wants us to hold White Knight County and block Su Nan's rebels from advancing east, but my plan is to annihilate the entire Su family within 2 months." Upon hearing this, Zhang Chong was immediately immediately shocked. Shen Lang then revealed a sly smile. Once I arrive at distant guard city, I will initiate a massacre against the Su family. There might be quite a few people killed, and I hope, Lord Zhang, you can cover for me. After hearing this, Zhang Chong felt a chill, but still asked, if that's the case, you need to give me an approximate number. I need to see if I can bear such a big blame. Shen Lang simply held up one finger. Zhang Chong, puzzled, asked, is that 100 or 1000? Shen Lang shook his head. No, it's neither. I will keep killing. 3 days later, Zhang Chong and Shen Lang led 3,000 troops out of capital city toward the western Celestial province, targeting the Su family stronghold. During the journey in the carriage, Shen Lang thought a lot. The Su family had once sent experts from the western regions to raid and plunder the Jin family's lands. If it weren't for the timely arrival of the bandit Kutuhuan, Mulan would surely have been seriously injured. Later, Su Jianting raided the count's mansion at night, not only killing 100 servants but also severely injuring his mother-in-law and causing the death of several brothers at the hands of Su Jianyan. Each of these incidents was a deep-seated vendetta. If he couldn't completely eliminate the Su family from the world, how could Shen Lang face his family again? Thinking this, Shen Lang said, Lord Zhang, you and I both know that whether Su Nan rebels depends entirely on his own strategic timing and the situations in the Chu and Chong states. Therefore, the sovereign's expectation for us is merely to keep Su Nan and his rebels trapped in White Knight County. However, the southern troops of the western Celestial province have likely already been infiltrated by the Su family. You won't be able to command them. So, I will leave these 3,000 troops here, and then I will stir up trouble in distant guard city to buy you 10 days. During this time, you need to clear all obstacles in White Knight County and take complete control of the city. Understand? After hearing this, Zhang Chong realized White Knight County has long been Su Nan's territory. Trying to break this situation with ordinary political means is utterly naive. The only way is to use strong measures to thoroughly clean up those who do not obey. After the cleanup, these 3,000 elite troops will be sufficient to take over this county. At this point, Shen Lang continued to smile. Lord Zhang, once we take down White Knight County, the main force of Su Nan's rebels will be all yours to deal with. That could be as many as 10 to 20,000 troops, but you only need to hold out for at most 1 month. Zhang Chong sighed after hearing this. We too are really crazy. Just over 3,000 people, and we still have to split our forces. Shen Lang comforted him. Lord Zhang, just relax. You only need to lead these 3,000 troops and do your job. Of course, I still have a backup plan. I have a special cavalry unit of 200 people here. Before he had finished speaking, a rapid sound of horse hooves came from outside the carriage. Then, they saw a tall female general leading 100 female knights, galloping towards them from afar. Upon seeing Shen Lang, the female general immediately dismounted and knelt on one knee, saluting with her fist. Subordinate Wu Lai greets young Master Shen. We are the female cavalry escort team specially assigned by the third princess to follow your orders. Shen Lang was startled. He had heard of a fierce female warrior under Ning Yan, but wasn't she assigned to the Great Flame Empire? At this moment, Zhang Chong from behind spoke. I know this woman. Her father Wu Zhuo was a famous general of the Yu Kingdom. Unfortunately, during the power struggle between Ning Yuanxian and Ning Yuanwu, he supported the wrong side, and his family was nearly exterminated. Wu Lai, due to her rough appearance and combat skills, was sent to the army as a fighting slave, where she often fought 10 enemies at once or participated in human-beast battles. Normally, fighting slaves do not live long, but Wu Lai survived for 7 years. Ning Yan somehow learned of this woman's family history and then requested her under the pretext of needing an escort for a northern marriage. Now, Wu Lai has become the strongest warrior under her command. Shen Lang, looking at the 200 female warriors before him, thought, surely Ning Yan has given me her only elite female unit. Then, Wu Lai said, young Master Shen, third princess is currently imprisoned in the clan affairs court, but she has instructed us that whatever command you have, even if it involves going through fire and water, we will not hesitate. Upon hearing this, Shen Lang was deeply moved. Tigress, I, Shen Lang, really did not misjudge you as a brother. Watching Shen Lang's proud and self-satisfied expression, Zhang Chong behind him couldn't help but sweat. His own daughter hadn't really fallen into Shen Lang's trap, otherwise, he would be regretting it just like the sovereign. With this protection, 2 days later, when they left Lang County, Zhang Chong also felt reassured to lead the army and parted ways with Shen Lang, each continuing to their respective stations. The scene shifts to the lakeside of 10,000 Mountains, where Sword King Li Qianqiu is sitting, distressed over his failed assassination mission. In fact, he is always known as Problem. Despite now being known as the Southern Sea Sword King, his humble origins always made him inadvertently fear Su Nan. At this moment, Li Qianqiu sighed deeply in frustration, feeling utterly useless. He knew that once the momentum is lost in a martial arts duel, there is no chance of winning, but he still couldn't control that inferiority complex. Now that the mission has failed, how would he explain it to Shen Lang? Having no choice, Li Qianqiu could only set off on his dilapidated farm cart back to capital city with this uneasy heart. That afternoon, on the mountain road in Lang County, Shen Lang's carriage just happened to encounter Li Qianqiu returning to capital city. Shen Lang was delighted to see him. Sword King, King, your return is just in time. My life has another layer of protection now. However, Li Qianqiu looked despondent upon seeing Shen Lang. Young Master Shen, I'm sorry, I failed this mission. Seeing his dejected appearance, Shen Lang wasn't actually surprised. He had always known it was the inferiority complex of the Sword King that was at play. Although the Sword King's martial skills surpassed those of other grandmasters, Su Nan was after all a powerhouse and century-old noble leader of the Yu Kingdom. In front of his imposing aura, the self-doubting Sword King would naturally be suppressed. Shen Lang sighed helplessly and sadly, patted Li Qianqiu on the shoulder, and comforted him. Sword King, you did very well. This was actually within my plans, so don't feel any guilt. Also, I have some good news. I have found a solution to the poison in your wife's body. I still need to extract some toxins from her for experiments. Before he could finish speaking, Li Qianqiu's face showed a mix of surprise and shock, and he immediately wanted to kneel to Shen Lang. Young Master Shen, as long as you can cure the poison in my wife, you can ask me to do anything. I, Li Qianqiu, would even give my life for you. Shen Lang smiled and said, Grandmaster Zhongchuk instructed me before he left that if he hasn't returned by the time I see you, to ask you to continue training Big Fool in martial arts. Do you think that's possible? Upon hearing this, Li Qianqiu immediately agreed. The Sword King once again became Shen Lang's coachman, not only driving the carriage but also instructing Big Fool in his training. Previously, Zhongchuk would ambush Big Fool 30,000 times per training session, but Li Sword King strictly increased it to 50,000 times. Such high-intensity training led Big Fool to be nearly dead tired every day, and even Shen Lang couldn't help wanting to ask for a day off for him, but Li Qianqiu mercilessly refused. This provided a bit of consolation for Shen 13, who had always envied Big Fool's combat value. So Big Fool also has it tough, since he also became strong through blood and tears. I feel more at peace. 5 days later, Shen Lang and his entourage finally arrived at Distant Guard City. The location of this city is just 10 miles from the Distant Guard Marquis 8, and not far to the west are the towering and majestic Snow Mountains, which are also the borders of the Chong Kingdom. In this situation of being surrounded in Suchan, one can imagine how perilous Shen Lang's subsequent actions would be. Shen Lang led his subordinates into the Lord's mansion. As they passed, the cold and hostile looks from the surrounding guards made it clear that their malice was almost spilling out of the screen. However, Shen Lang just smirked disdainfully. Just then, an exaggerated laugh came from ahead. Following this, a man dressed in luxurious clothes and with a sleazy appearance came out. You must be the new lord, Lord Shen Lang? I am Su Lin, the chief clerk of Distant Guard City. Welcome, my lord. Hearing this, Shen Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. What a warm welcome. I am the lord of Distant Guard City. I am the master here. Why do you behave as if you're greeting a guest? Thinking this, Shen Lang suppressed his anger and bowed as he moved forward. I am indeed Shen Lang. You must be the nephew of Marquis Su, my cousin Su Lin. Su Lin smiled and returned the bow. Cousin Shen Lang, you must have had a tough journey. Shen Lang continued to be polite. As I am new here, I hope for your care in the future. Cousin. Su Lin extended his hand, feigning enthusiasm to touch Shen Lang. We are all family. Everything can be easily said. However, Shen Lang directly avoided his hand and coldly ordered Wu Lai standing behind him. Kill him. As the words fell, Wu Lai swiftly drew her sword, and Su Lin's head was immediately separated from his body, leaving only a corpse on the ground in an instant. Seeing the exposed arm of the corpse covered in poisonous sores, Shen 13 quickly stepped forward to protect Shen Lang, but Shen Lang's expression remained indifferent. A body double? Very good. It seems this disease-ridden guy was a greeting gift from the Su family. At that moment, another Su Lin walked out from the Lord's mansion, laughing. The real Su Lin had arrived. Son-in-law, I am really sorry. I was delayed by some matters and didn't mean to startle you just now. Seeing this, Shen Lang feigned shock. So you are my cousin. I thought that man was you just now. Fortunately, when I saw the poisonous sores on his arm, I knew he was a fake. I almost let this pure and unstained body get contaminated. Su Lin sneered and explained, this man is a famous impersonator in Distant Guard City. Probably got the disease from messing around. I didn't expect him to impersonate me today and scare you, son-in-law. He truly deserved his death. Shen Lang laughed and smiled, but internally he was calculating. He quietly observed the distance between himself and Su Lin, planning for Sword King to make a move. Suddenly, a whisper from Li Qianqiu reached his ears. Young master, be careful. There is a top expert near Su Lin. Shen Lang's gaze immediately fell on the person behind Su Lin. This person was a bald monk, and Shen Lang felt a sense of familiarity. Yes, he looked very much like the high priest Ku Hai from the Snow Mountain Temple. The monk approached and said, I am Su Nan, a monk from the Great Calamity Temple of the Void Sect. Pleased to meet you, Lord Shen. Upon hearing this, Shen Lang was slightly startled. He certainly knew about the Void Sect, a religious sect with followers across half the world, whose scriptures originated from ancient Buddhist texts. Over a millennium, the Void Sect had branched into 3 major temples. Heaven's Reach Temple, which focuses on spiritual cultivation, Hanging Temple, known for its noble virtues, and the Great Calamity Temple, where monk Su Nan belonged. Heaven's Reach Temple and Hanging Temple are generally mild and noble, home to many true masters who enjoy an exalted status. However, the Great Calamity Temple is an outlier. Its its monks specializing in various forbidden arts, especially secret bedroom techniques, which, due to their notable effects, have been highly sought after by many prominent families, subsequently gaining countless followers, until a few decades ago, Emperor Jiangli launched a devastating attack on them, driving them to the western regions. Yet unexpectedly, they developed a strong influence there, with the Snow Mountain Temple and the Sand Barbarian Tribe's Decay and Flourishing Temple in Chong being branches of the Great Calamity Temple. Thinking this, Shen Lang asked, I wonder if Monk Kuhai has had any interactions with the master? Monk Ku Nan bowed with one hand and replied, Amiba, that Kuhai is indeed my junior brother. After confirming their identities, Shen Lang cheekily said, I heard that Monk Kuhai committed great transgressions in Chong and was struck by divine retribution, which is quite unfortunate. At this, a fierce look flashed across Monk Ku Nan's face. Lord Shen, we in the Great Calamity Temple always believe in karma and retribution. It's not that it will not come, just that the time has not yet arrived. So, please be patient. Such an overt threat was not lost on Shen Lang, but he did not respond, only looking at the other party with a mocking expression. At this moment, Su Lin interjected, Son-in-law, I have ordered the Lord's mansion to be vacated. You are free to move in at your leisure.